You're lying. Humans can't breed year-round. Prove it then. Alien Princess challenges him. Cassian adjusted the heavy silver cuffs of his formal tunic, the weight of the fabric a grounding force against the humid air of the palace on Alcyone. Across the violet-hued ballroom, Princess Quorra watched him with eyes that shimmered like pools of mercury, her skin a soft, iridescent teal that seemed to glow under the artificial stars of the ceiling. She moved with a liquid grace that made every human in the room look clumsy by comparison, her long, elegant fingers tracing the rim of a glass. Cassian felt the familiar hum of attraction, a biological imperative that he had been taught to suppress in the presence of royalty. The air between them was thick with more than just the scent of exotic flora. It was charged with a mounting tension that had been building since the summit began. Your scientists are quite the storytellers, ambassador, Quorra said, stepping into his personal space with a boldness that caught him off guard. Her voice carried a melodic quality, a series of harmonic tones that vibrated deep in his chest. To which stories do you refer, Your Highness? Cassian asked, bowing his head just enough to show respect without yielding his status. He could see the fine, scale-like patterns along her collarbone, a mesmerizing detail he hadn't noticed from a distance. The claim that your species possesses no breeding season, she replied, a smirk playing on her lips. That you are receptive to procreation at any point in your solar cycle. It is a biological absurdity. No complex organism can sustain such a caloric and hormonal drain without periods of dormancy. You are lying to make your species seem more formidable in population growth. She leaned closer, the heat radiating from her body far higher than a human's. I assure you, it is no lie, Cassian said, his voice dropping an octave as he met her gaze. The Princess Quorra laughed, a sound like glass chimes, and gestured toward the private balcony overlooking the glowing gardens. Then prove it, she challenged, her mercury eyes darkening. Prove that your biology is as relentless as your expansion. If you can maintain interest when the stars are not aligned for it, perhaps humanity is worth the alliance we discuss. Cassian felt a surge of adrenaline, the primal human drive to meet a challenge. He followed her away from the prying eyes of the delegates, the heavy doors of her private sanctum closing with a definitive thud that signaled the end of diplomacy and the beginning of something far more visceral. The room was bathed in a soft, amber light, the walls lined with tapestries that depicted the long history of her people. Quorra turned to face him, her iridescence deepening into a rich, bruised purple. You speak of endurance, she whispered, unhooking the silk wrap that served as her bodice. But I see only a man who is likely exhausted by the politics of the day. My people only feel this pull when the great moon is full. How can you feel it now, when there is nothing in the sky to command you? Cassian stepped forward, his hand reaching out to hover just inches from her shoulder. We don't need the moons, Quorra, he said, using her name without the title for the first time. We are the masters of our own desires. Our hearts don't wait for an invitation from the cosmos. He allowed his fingers to graze her skin, shocked by the velvet texture and the sudden spark of static electricity that jumped between them. She gasped, a small, sharp sound that echoed in the quiet room. Her posture shifted, her spine arching slightly as she leaned into his touch. It is so warm, she murmured, her hand coming up to rest over his heart. Your internal furnace is always burning. Is this why you never stop? Why your ships are in every sector? Cassian nodded, his other hand finding the small of her back. We are a species of constant motion, he said, drawing her closer until their chests brushed. The suggestive curve of her hips pressed against his thighs, and Cassian felt the undeniable response of his body. Quorra's eyes widened as she felt the change in him, a physical manifestation of his words that she couldn't ignore. You truly are ready, she whispered, her breath hitching. Without a cycle, without a season, it is overwhelming. She reached for the fasteners of his tunic, her movements becoming more frantic as the reality of human biology set in. Cassian took her wrists, his grip firm but gentle, slowing her down. It isn't just a reflex, he said, his gaze locked on hers. It's a choice. Every moment we choose this. That is what makes us different. Before she could respond, a sharp, metallic crack echoed through the room. The amber light flickered and died, replaced by the harsh red strobe of the palace's emergency system. Cassian's diplomatic training vanished, replaced by the survival instincts that had kept humanity alive on 1,000 hostile worlds. He shoved Quorra toward the floor, shielding her body with his own as the balcony window shattered inward. A shadow moved in the darkness, the glint of a high-frequency blade cutting through the air where her head had been moments before. "Stay down," Cassian commanded, his voice no longer melodic or soft. The assassin was a lithe, gruscunned creature, a member of the Vullan separatist faction that had been protesting the human alliance. It moved with unnatural speed, but Cassian had spent years training in high-gravity environments. To him, the assassin moved as if through water. He lunged forward, his movement a blur of calculated violence. He didn't use a weapon. He used the sheer density of human bone and muscle. He caught the assassin's wrist, the sound of snapping bone audible over the alarm. With a guttural roar, Cassian threw the creature against the stone pillar, the impact enough to crack the masonry. Quorra watched from the floor, her mercury eyes wide with a new kind of terror and fascination. She had seen her own guards fight, but they were ritualistic, bound by the rhythms of their species. Cassian was a force of nature. His movements lacked any grace but possessed a terrifying efficiency. He stood over the unconscious assassin, his chest heaving, his tunic torn to reveal the scars of previous encounters. He turned back to her, the predatory light in his eyes slowly fatting back into the man she had spoken to in the ballroom. "Are you hurt?" he asked, reaching down to help her up. I am unharmed," she stammered, accepting his hand. Her fingers were trembling. "You moved before the sensors even registered the breach. How?" Cassian pulled her into the center of the room, away from the broken glass. "Adrenaline," he said, wiping a smudge of soot from her cheek. "Our bodies dump a chemical into our bloodstream that sharpens our senses and increases our strength in a crisis. It's another part of our biology that doesn't have an off switch. We are always ready for the fight, just as we are always ready for the other." Quorra looked at the fallen assassin and then back at Cassian. The fear in her eyes was being replaced by a deep, resonant heat. "Your species is a paradox," she said, stepping back into his arms, ignoring the alarms that still blared in the distance. "You are capable of such sudden, brutal violence, and yet you stand here trembling because you want me." She reached out, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. "The Valen will try again," she whispered. "The palace is no longer safe, but I find I do not care. I want to see more of this human fire." Cassian felt the weight of the situation, the political fallout that would follow this night, but the physical pull toward the woman in his arms was too strong to ignore. "The guards will be here in minutes," he warned, even as he leaned down to kiss the sensitive skin of her neck. "Then we have minutes," she replied, her hands sliding into his hair. "Show me the endurance of your people, Cassian. Show me why the galaxy should fear your love as much as your war." He didn't need further prompting. He lifted her, her legs wrapping around his waist with a strength that surprised him. Her skin was hot now, a feverish glow that matched the intensity of his own pulse. He carried her to the large, circular bed at the center of the room, the fabric soft beneath them as he lowered her down. The contrast between his rugged, scarred skin and her smooth, iridescent form was a visual testament to their different worlds. He moved over her, his hands exploring the unique geography of her body. She was built differently than a human woman, her muscles more supple, her joints more flexible. Every touch was a discovery, a new piece of data for his hungry senses. She was vocal in her pleasure, a series of trilling notes that climbed higher and higher as he worked his way down her body. "Is this always how it is?" she gasped, her back arching as his tongue found a particularly sensitive spot behind her ear. "It can be," Cassian whispered, his voice thick with need. "If the connection is right, if the desire is there." He could feel the power in her, the hidden strength of a royal line that had ruled Alcyone for millennia. She wasn't a fragile flower. She was a predator in her own right, her nails digging into his shoulders as she pulled him down for a deep, desperate kiss. It was a clash of cultures, a biological exchange that felt like it was rewriting the laws of the universe. As they moved together, The sounds of the palace chaos seemed to fade into the background. There was only the rhythm of their breathing and the friction of their skin. Cassian pushed himself to the limit, his human stamina allowing him to match her intensity, and then some. He wanted to prove more than just a biological fact. He wanted to prove that humanity could offer her something her own people couldn't. A passion that wasn't dictated by the stars, but by the person standing right in front of her. Quorra's skin began to pulse with a rhythmic light, a bioluminescent display of her climax that bathed the room in a soft, ethereal blue. She cried out, a long melodic note that seemed to hang in the air for an eternity. Cassian followed her shortly after, the release of violent, beautiful explosion of sensation that left him drained but completely present. They lay there for a moment, tangled in the sheets, the silence of the room returning as the alarms finally cut out. "You were right," she whispered, her head resting on his chest. "The reports were wrong. They didn't describe the heat. They didn't describe the way you look at me, like I am the only thing in the galaxy that matters." Cassian stroked her hair, his heart rate slowly returning to normal. "That's the secret, Quorra," he said. "Our biology gives us the ability, but our hearts give us the reason. We don't just breed year-round. We love year-round." The doors to the sanctum burst open, and a squad of guards led by Captain Asajj rushed in, weapons drawn. They stopped dead at the sight of the unconscious assassin and the human diplomat shielded by their princess. Cassian didn't move, his arm remaining firmly around Quorra, his gaze steady as he looked at the soldiers. "The assassin is secured," Cassian said, his voice cold and commanding. "See to it that he is questioned, and get a medical team for the princess." Asajj bowed low, the shame of the security breach evident in the set of his shoulders. "At once, Ambassador, we did not realize the human delegation was so well trained in close-quarters combat." Quorra sat up, pulling a silk sheet around her, her iridescence returning to its calm, teal state. "The ambassador has proven many things tonight, Captain," she said, her voice regaining its royal authority. "Things that will change the course of our empire. You will treat him with the highest honors. He has saved my life, and he has opened my eyes." The guards moved to remove the Valen prisoner, their movements hurried and efficient. As the room cleared, Quorra turned back to Cassian, a playful spark returning to her mercury eyes. "The summit continues tomorrow," she said, tracing the line of his collarbone. "There will be many questions about the alliance, many doubts from the other houses." Cassian smiled, leaning in to kiss her forehead. "Let them doubt," he said. "We've already won the most important battle." The morning sun of Alcyone rose over the horizon, casting a long, golden light across the broken glass of the balcony. The city below was waking up, unaware of the shift in galactic power that had occurred in the princess's chambers. The human delegation arrived at the summit hall to find a different atmosphere. The skepticism that had greeted them was replaced by a wary respect. Rumors of the assassination attempt and Cassian's defense had spread like wildfire. Princess Quorra entered the hall, her attire even more regal than the night before, but her gaze immediately found Cassian. She didn't hide the connection between them. She stood before the High Council, her voice echoing through the chamber. "For too long, we have judged other species by our own limitations," she began. "We believed that biology was a cage, that we were all bound by the cycles of our worlds. But humanity has shown us that there is another way, a way of constant growth, constant passion, and constant protection." She looked at the human diplomat, a small smile touching her lips. "The alliance with Earth is not just a matter of trade or defense. It is a recognition of a species that refuses to be defined by the stars. They are a people of the sun, burning bright and without end. And I, for one, am ready to walk in that light." The council erupted in debate, but the outcome was already clear. The HFY narrative was no longer just a series of reports. It was a living reality. Humanity had arrived, and they hadn't done it through conquest or technology alone. They had done it by being the most stubbornly, relentlessly alive species the galaxy had ever seen. Cassian stood at the back of the hall, his hand resting on the hilt of his ceremonial dagger. He knew the road ahead would be difficult. There would be more assassins, more political traps, and more cultural misunderstandings. But as he looked at Quorra, he knew that the challenge she had issued him was just the beginning. "You look pleased with yourself," a voice said beside him. It was Jadden, another member of the human team. "I heard you had a busy night." Cassian didn't look away from the princess. "Just doing my job, Jadden," he said, a hint of a smile on his face. "Proving that humans are exactly as advertised." The summit concluded with the signing of the Alcyone Accords, a document that would link the two species for centuries to come. As the delegates filtered out, Quorra made her way to Cassian's side. "I have been thinking," she whispered, leaning close so only he could hear. "If your species is so consistent, perhaps we should begin the next phase of our cultural exchange tonight." Cassian laughed, the sound warm and genuine. He took her hand, his fingers interlacing with hers. "I think that can be arranged, Your Highness," he said. "After all, we have a lot of lost time to make up for, and I have a lot more to prove." They walked out of the hall together, a human and an alien, their steps perfectly in sync. The galaxy was a vast, cold place, but in that moment it felt smaller, warmer, and full of a primitive, beautiful potential. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not by changing who they were, but by being more human than anyone thought possible. The legacy of that night would be felt in the generations to come, in the children who would carry the fire of both worlds. It was the start of a new history, one written in the language of desire and the ink of shared blood. Cassian and Quorra were the first, but they would not be the last. The human breeding season had officially begun, and it was never going to end. As they reached the private transport that would take them back to the palace, Cassian paused, looking up at the sky. The stars were there as they had always been, but they no longer looked like masters. They looked like witnesses. "What are you thinking?" Quorra asked, tugging on his hand. "I'm thinking about the future," Cassian said, looking down at her. "And how much fun we're going to have building it." She smiled, her mercury eyes glowing with a pure, unadulterated joy. "Then let's not waste another second," she said.